Be very careful to whom you entrust your data and what kind of information are you sharing and how. Because if someone asks you to email your confidential information or picture of the ID, it can be misused very easily.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, phishing schemes, and criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner from the CyberWire, and joining me is Joe Kerrigan from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
We got some good stories to share this week. And later in the show, Martin Rehack, CEO and founder at Resistant AI, is talking about both deep and shallow fakes.
So who's got the advantage in cybersecurity, the attacker or the defender? Intelligent people differ on this, but the conventional wisdom is that the advantage goes to the attacker. But why is this? Stay with us and we'll have some insights from our sponsor, KnowBe4, that put it into perspective.
All right, Joe, before we jump into our stories this week, we have a bit of follow-up. I will read it here. It's from a listener named Joe, who writes in and says, Joe's statement about not using legacy OSs is unfortunately not an option for many of us. My former employee was a moderately large mechanical contractor, and our manufacturing facility had a number of older machines running legacy OSs. Sheet metal laser cutters running XP, a few lathes running DOS still. Cost to upgrade these was in the 5 to 60 range,
Right.
And the management felt that while it was still working, why pay to upgrade versus buying a newer machine? Secure network to us, therefore, meant no network essentially,
Right.
air-gapped, no network connections other than between the onboard systems for that specific machine, loaders versus cutters, and all files were sneaker-netted via managed USB sticks, or in the case of the lathe, printouts that got entered via the keypad.
Right.
Old school.
Have you ever seen a lathe keypad, Dave?
I don't believe I have, no.
In high school, I worked in a machine shop, and we had a Hitachi lathe. I don't know what the operating system on it was, but watching the machinist he was explaining to me how it worked.
Yeah.
You just have to select a tool, and then because it's a lathe, you're working pretty much linearly in two directions. It's not really a 3D kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it was, or at least that's the way I remember. I may be wrong. Somebody's probably going to write and say, "Joe, you're not a machinist." I never was. But it was tedious watching this guy program this thing directly on the machine.
Right. Joe continues and says, I left before the last CMMC audit, so I don't know if it was good enough, but my old team hasn't been complaining about that specifically lately, so I'm guessing it was good enough. That or the new management's other initiatives are just bigger pains in their sides.
Right. So this is kind of my point with this. You have these old legacy systems, and he's right. The cost to upgrade them is enormous.
Right.
And we talk about I think we were talking the sentence we were using, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right?
Yeah. Right.
Well, if I can operate this thing without having to connect it to a network, that's fine. I don't have a problem with having an XP machine sitting alone running a lathe or a sheet metal cutter, as long as it's not networked to anything. But
right.
the moment you plug that thing into any other network, the moment somebody else finds it, they're going in.
Yeah.
So keep it off the internet. Of course, you don't work there anymore, Joe, so that's not your problem really, but
right.
which is good. But yeah, just make sure these things never get connected to the internet. And they were probably never engineered to connect to the internet. When was the last time a machine was running DOS? It's been decades before people started envisioning these kind of things. So this is what I would call operational technology, and it needs to be isolated.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they're doing it fine. And he's right. The cost to upgrade it is prohibitive.
Yeah, and I think he brings up a good point too, which is that, it's easy for folks on the security side to say, patch your systems.
Right,
don't
right.
run outdated OSs. But, meanwhile, here in the real world, it's
Yeah,
not always
exactly.
easy to do that. And
I
so
think
you
that's
need to
what
be
I was-
empathetic about that.
That's what I was trying to say, actually. Is,
Yeah.
the manufacturer goes, well, just put it on a secure network, and there is no such thing as a secure network. And the only option is just to air gap it.
Yeah.
And not put it on any network, which works because you can get the files off it. And we see this in hospitals, too, with like 20-year-old MRI machines. There's nothing wrong with the MRI machine, except for the fact that it's running Windows XP. So just don't connect it to the internet.
Yeah. I had a friend who, this was years ago, but he was making a pretty penny finding and refurbing old Apple II Pluses because there was some legacy machine that the Postal Service used that was still
Still running an Apple II Plus.
running on Apple II Pluses, right? And he was an old Apple guy from the old days, so he had the skills to be able to know whether one of these machines was running properly and was refurbed and to handle all of this stuff, but. You never know how far back this stuff goes. Every now and then you hear about some system, in a barn somewhere that's still running on an old TRS-80 that's running the milking machines or something.
This is a great example of kind of the same problem we're talking about. This is the Postal Service running an operational technology on a consumer-based machine,
right?
Consumer operating system, which is what all these things are doing. With Windows XP boxes or DOS boxes. Those are consumer-level operating systems.
Yeah.
But to go with something like a real-time operating system or with a like IBM, it's going to be much more expensive to do that.
Sure.
Even though you'll get the longer-term support from a company like IBM than you will from a company like Microsoft.
Yeah.
It's just going to price you out of the market because the other guy's going to go with Microsoft and put a $100 OS and a $500 machine on it.
Right. Right. Yeah. All right. Well, a point well made, and we appreciate Joe writing in with his insights. Of course, we would love to hear from you. Our email address is hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com. All right, Joe, let's jump into our stories this week. I actually have two stories, both a quicker one. The first one is just a quick reminder. I actually got an email. This is from Brian Frosh, who is our Attorney General here in Maryland.
Yes.
And they sent out a consumer alert warning people to be aware that after Hurricane Ian, and indeed anytime there's a natural disaster weather event like this, the market tends to get, and I'm no pun intended, flooded with damaged cars that were marinating in the water down there for who knows how long. Right? And those cars get bought at salvage auctions, and there are folks who rebuild them and refurb them, but the title on them should be marked as being a salvage or a total loss. But there are dishonest people out there who kind of launder the title, hide the damage, and then offer those vehicles for sale. So
I imagine that if you move them from one state to another, it becomes much easier to do that.
Probably. Probably. So it's just a warning to be on the alert of that. Obvious things like musty odors and, those sorts of things. But it's just a good reminder that and also because the used car market is still pretty tight right now. And, prices are high. And so to have a bunch of cars hit the market, just buyer beware.
Right. As an aside, I'll be doing a presentation with the Cash Campaign of Maryland and Attorney General Brian Frosh on Thursday, the day before this podcast comes out. But you'll still be able to see the recording of the meeting on the Cash Campaign of Maryland's website.
Oh, okay.
So,
perfect.
yeah.
Check it out. My main story, though, comes from the folks over at Gizmodo. This is written by Passant Raby. And I'll just read the title. It's An imposter claiming to be an astronaut wooed a Japanese woman into paying for a return ticket to Earth.
We had this as a catch of the day when it first started being a scam. And at the time we said, this seems ridiculous to us, but it doesn't to somebody else.
Yeah. Well, this is a 65-year-old woman in Japan, paid the equivalent of about $30,000 in this online scam. The scammer claimed to be a Russian astronaut, so I suppose that would be a cosmonaut.
Cosmonaut, that's right.
Who was looking for a ticket back to Earth. And it's the classic story. This person reached out to this poor woman, started a conversation which led to an online romance.
Right, very quickly into lovey-dovey things.
Right, and then started asking for money, but claimed that in order to get home where he promised a relationship. He needed money to pay for his trip home. And of course, that's not how any of this works.
No.
If you're up on the ISS, return service is guaranteed.
Yes,
So,
it's one way or another.
yeah, that's right. This article points out that space agencies like NASA pay about $50 to $55 million to get its astronauts up to the ISS, and that price does include a return trip back to Earth.
Yes.
So it's funny to talk about. It sounds funny. It is kind of funny in its absurdity, but it's not funny to the poor woman who's out $30,000.
Yeah, that's the tragedy here.
Yeah, and also has, I suspect, a broken heart about this too.
Sure.
She really thought that, I suspect this was the man of her dreams. Who wouldn't want to have a relationship with an astronaut, right? It just doesn't get much better than that, I would think.
Yeah. That's pretty glamorous, I would say.
That's right. So we'll have a link to the story in the show notes. Sad story, but again, worth spreading the word about that. As ridiculous as some of these things sound, people are out there falling for them.
They're going to work.
Yeah,
right.
They're going to work. And in this case, this one did. All right, Joe, that's what I have for us this week. What do you have for us?
Dave, I also have two stories. My first story comes from Lauren Schwentker at KY3, which is, let me get the call letters up here. It's KYTV. Guess which state?
Well, it's a K, so it has to be west of the Mississippi, but
that's good.
I don't know.
KYTV, KY3, I would have guessed Kentucky, but that's not west of the Mississippi. But
okay.
You're right. It is from Missouri, Springfield, Missouri.
Okay.
But I picked this one because I'm pretty sure I saw something like this recently right here in Baltimore.
Oh.
Yep. It is Springfield Police warn drivers of potential funeral scam. And potential is in quotes on this. But there is a person standing, and they have pictures of it, a person standing in the street wearing a day-glow green vest with the reflective strips on it. And they are walking with a sign that says funeral for this person and has a picture. You can't really see on the picture here. But they also have a little bucket that you're using to collect coins or change. So they're essentially panhandling, allegedly, for a funeral for someone who has passed away. It's kind of like the in-person version of the GoFundMe scam, where somebody dies and immediately scammers go out and they set up fake GoFundMe pages, just take the money and run, and the family never benefits from it.
Right.
I doubt the family of this person also benefits from it. So, my advice, don't give money to people at stoplights with collecting for a funeral. The one thing that I do give money to is the fire department locally may do something called Fill the Boot, where where it's a campaign to collect for some charity, particularly if it's a paid fire, a taxpayer-funded fire department like we have around here.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it's just for the fire department themselves to fund themselves.
Right.
But it's really easy to tell that those are authentic because they have large, modern pieces of fire equipment parked right there with their lights on.
It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to borrow a fire truck. Right.
Yeah. The fire department's not really giving those out.
No.
When you see that, okay, that's probably legit, right?
Yeah.
It's probably actually firefighters doing this. This is probably not.
Yeah.
So be aware.
It's hard, when you see folks at the street corner, your heart goes out to them very often, and
right.
So it's hard. I understand the impulse to give them some money, but I suppose, would you agree that it's better to just give directly to an organization that helps folks? Yeah,
I would do that. Or my rule is if someone looks like they're hungry, I will buy them a meal. But I generally don't give money to people.
Okay.
Just because I don't. I have that always that scam, that fear of the scam in the back, and also I don't know. I've talked to people about this, and I've heard people say, you don't. If you're going to give somebody money, you don't get to tell them what to do with the money.
Right.
Which is legit. That's
my
fair.
philosophy. Yeah.
There's always the theory, they're just going to spend it on drugs. Well, okay. But if I want to, so I don't know. I do give to organizations that help people.
Right.
But if I see someone who's in immediate need of food, I have in the past purchased food for people.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. What else do you have for us this week?
My other one is not as nice. We haven't talked about one of these recently, but this is coming from Nick Bohr at WISN in Milwaukee, and it's a story about a kidnapping scam. This is a woman she's only being identified by a pseudonym in here, but she was called on the phone, and it was the same story we've heard before, where there is someone screaming in the background, and this woman is yelling, this person yelling in the background is going, "Mom, they're hurting me, help me."
Yeah.
Right? And she goes immediately into panic mode. Now, fortunately, she has enough wherewithal to contact her husband and to start the process of finding out if her daughter is okay. Because the way these scams work is they just dial a random number, and it's these people putting on this drama play that's really convincing.
Right.
And they're telling you that they have your kid and that they're going to kill your kid if you don't pay up. So she was actually in the process of going to the bank and had gotten the money out of the bank and was getting ready to do something that they were telling her to, just in case they had actually had her daughter.
Wow.
But that's when her husband contacted her and said, the child is safe. And once she had that verification from her husband, she knew the jig was up, and she told them to go pound sand. And so the thing about this, and the thing I wanted to bring up about this, is this can happen to anybody at any point in time.
Right.
So if this happens and you haven't ever thought to yourself, what would I do if this happened to me? You're not going to have a plan immediately. Your emotions are going to take over, and your rational mind is going to shut down.
Right.
There is nothing in the world more terrifying to any parent than the loss or harm coming to a child.
Right. We talked about that's why when the school nurse calls, the first thing they say is, everything's okay, but...
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That is exactly right. And I'm sure that the first call from the new school nurse, the nurse that just graduated from nursing school, goes in there and she calls and says, "This is so and so from your child's school."
Right.
What happened? That's a lesson that nurses learn very quickly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Everything's okay. But so I don't know how to tell people how to prepare for this, other than the fact that they should know that it's a scam. But what do you do when somebody calls and says...
The thing I can think of is to have, to pre-establish a buddy system.
Right.
And that buddy could be your spouse. That buddy could be one of your kids, could be a friend. Doesn't matter. Just someone you trust, and the two of you agree that if something like this happens, they're going to be your first call.
Right.
And they're going to be the one who is of sound mind to be able to try to figure out if there's anything to this.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
To me, that's probably one of the best things you could do here. Someone who's not in that heightened emotional state, who can think rationally and help you figure out what's going on here. One
of the big problems with this kind of attack is that it immediately occupies the device you need to reach out to somebody with. Right? So you've got the scammer on the phone. They're telling you that they have your kid. Right? You can't just put them on hold and call your wife or your buddy in this buddy system. You have to have that number committed to memory. I made a point about 2 years ago of memorizing my wife's phone number. This is a phone number she's had for 10 years. Yeah. I didn't know it. Right. Yeah. And that's a problem. Because what happens if I lose my cell phone and need to contact my wife? Right. What happens here's what actually caused it to happen to me was somebody said, I was watching a video on YouTube and somebody said, what if you get arrested and you're being processed? They take all of your possessions, including your cell phone. How are you going to call your wife? I don't know. I don't know the number. Now I know the number. Now the number's in my head. Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess part of this too is that it'd be good to have a cover story for the scammers to say, I'm going to put you on hold because I need to call my bank to make sure that the money is there. Right. Or to see what I need to do to get the money out of the bank. Right? Yeah. Because that will likely satisfy them that you're still going by their plan, not your plan. Right. Right? So, if you have something like that ready to go, maybe that would work. But you're right. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. It is a tough one. And I hope it never happens to anybody. And I hope that if they that law enforcement finds the people that do this.
Yeah.
I really do.
One time I was visiting my parents, and I went to my folks, have a condo nearby, and I went, and my mom was in the middle of a phone call with someone when I walked in, and I could tell she was agitated.
Yeah.
And I said, "Mom, what's going on?" And she said, "They're saying this, and I owe them money, and it's so-and-so." I said, "Hang up the phone, Mom." "But they're saying this." "Hang up the phone, Mom."
Right.
"But they're saying," "Hang up the phone, Mom."
Hang up the phone.
She just, "Okay." And she hung up the phone. I said, "They're scammers."
Yeah.
And of course, they didn't call back.
Right.
But had I not been there,
Yeah.
she could have gone down the path.
Sure.
So sometimes you just got to be lucky.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, those are our stories this week. We will have links to all of those in the show notes, of course. Joe, it is time to move on to our catch of the day.
Dave, our catch of the day comes from Richard from Liverpool. Dave, Liverpool needs to be rebranded with something nicer, I think. The name Liverpool, never really a fan. Kind of like, they did with Skaggsville and changing the name to Maple Lawn.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, Richard writes, this is like some weird double bluff. Say it's genuine, and it looks like a fish, though. Has spelling mistakes, but keeps reiterating that it's genuine. I think it's genuine, but one doth protest too much. Dave, go ahead and take it away.
Well, in honor of Richard from being from Liverpool, I'll say this. Security update. Please reset your password. Hello, we've been updating our website security system, so please reset your password to complete the security update for your account. You only need to do this once. We previously sent a security update from a different email address, which raised some concerns. At Dark's Corner, we take the security of your data very seriously, so we are resending this email from this address, so you know it's legitimate. We've added a banner to the homepage of our website, so you know this is a genuine request. Once you've reset your password, you can take advantage of all the new website features, including faster loading, improved search, and increased security. Reset my password or visit dartscorner.co.uk. If you have any questions or problems, please contact us using live chat on our website, or reply to this email or contact us.
So that's the end of it, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Darts Corner is a site that sells dart supplies.
Oh, like playing darts in a pub?
Yes.
Okay.
Every time I walk by a dartboard, there's some part of me that's that gets childishly giddy about it. I love the idea of playing darts.
Okay.
Although every time I do it, I hurt my elbow. I think I'm doing it improperly.
Okay.
Perhaps I need to take dart lessons. Anyway.
Yeah, they're not that heavy.
Right. This this is a legit email, I think.
Huh.
Because if you go if you look up Darts Corner online, it gives you the same URL. And if you go to that URL, it does in fact say, reset your password here. They've put a banner up on their front page.
Huh.
But this is, what I think this is an example of how to not notify your customers that they need to reset their password for security reasons. Because Richard is exactly right. This does look like a phishing email. Previously is misspelled in this email. And it reiterates over and over again, trying to, as Richard puts it, protesting too much. This is a poorly worded corporate communication. There's no shortage of those in the world, though. So I don't mean to rain on Darts Corner, but this is just one example of probably hundreds of thousands that come out every year.
Yeah.
But this can be done better. Number one, saying go directly to our website and click on the change my password link.
Yeah.
But don't send an email with a link to change your password. That reeks of phishing.
Don't you think it's remarkable that in this day of free spell check and grammar check,
yeah,
in so many online tools, that this stuff still happens?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I do find it remarkable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was typing something in Gmail recently, and it was making grammar recommendations to me.
Yeah.
And Outlook does the same thing.
Yeah, they all do. I mean, what? All right. Well, our thanks to Richard for sending this in. We do appreciate it. And of course, we would love to hear from you. If you have something you'd like us to consider for the show, our email is hackinghumans@thecyberwire.com.
Now let's return to our sponsor's question about the attacker's advantage. Why do the experts think this is so? It's not like a military operation where the defender is thought to have most of the advantages. In cyberspace, the attacker can just keep trying and probing at low risk and low cost, and the attacker only has to be successful once. And as KnowBe4 points out, email filters designed to keep malicious spam out have a failure rate of over 10%. That sounds pretty good. Who wouldn't want to bat nearly 900? But this isn't baseball. If your technical defenses fail in 1 out of 10 tries, you're out of luck and maybe out of business. The last line of defense is your human firewall. You can test that firewall with KnowBe4's free phishing test, which you can order up at knowbe4.com/fishtest. That's knowbe4.com/fishtest.
Joe, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Martin Rehack. He is the CEO and founder at a company called Resistant AI, and we're talking about both deep and shallow fakes. Here's my conversation with Martin Rehack.
So deep fakes are the hard and non-scalable way how to commit fraud. And I'm pretty certain their time will come in the future, but if you look at current fraud, and if you look at current financial crime, deepfakes are a very small minority. We talk about them a lot because they are interesting, they are technically exciting, there is something new. But hiding behind that attention is a much more important way of shallow fakes. Shallow fakes are automatically produced fakes using traditional means. So these could be thousands of documents produced at scale to impersonate different people. You can buy a database of leaked social security numbers and addresses and other information, and you can produce documents using that information. And then you can put pictures of people you actually have working for you on those documents, and then proceed with identity theft at scale, which is something that's quite lucrative. And these are the documents we keep encountering on a daily basis.
And can you give us some examples of how folks are trying to implement this sort of thing, the types of scams they're trying to pull off?
We see this mostly in the onboarding process of neobanks and other fintechs, but increasingly with traditional banks, because digital onboarding is today's standard. So what we see is people opening accounts or robots opening accounts pretending to be people. And these so-called robotic identities are something that's inherently scalable. Because what people haven't realized by turning finance as a human-driven service into something that's purely technological is that by turning a process into code, you open yourself to a whole new category of attacks that go after the weaknesses in the code. But these weaknesses are not network security or system security issues that our cybersecurity colleagues deal with, but these are weaknesses in the process. And sometimes they are amusing. You have people identifying with inflatable dolls. So because if you don't think about all of the possible options in the algorithm, you say, I want to have a look at the ID card, I want to have a look at the person, and I want to match the face. But what if the face is an inflatable object? Because what you thought about was, well, it needs to be a 3D face. Okay, it's a 3D face, but actually it's a doll. And then you think, okay, it needs to be live, but then someone fakes an ID of a cat. We have seen these. We have seen an ID card with a picture of a cat on it, which, if you are a regulated financial institution, doesn't look very good in your data when someone comes to inspect.
Not a good day for the audit, right?
Well, at least you remember that day for the rest of your life. So
that's right.
And so does the auditor.
So that's fascinating. I mean, and so what is to be done to protect people against this? How are you detecting these sorts of things and putting mitigations in place?
So it's a daily escalation battle, because what we see is that The fakes are getting better and better on a daily basis. They used to be quite amusing initially, because when you had the first generation of OCR working on ID cards, the software was so fragile that it was very happy to read any kind of number. So people just took a Post-it note, put it on a stolen ID card with a different name. They changed a bunch of numbers with Post-its, and it was accepted. These are the old days. It shouldn't work anymore. It does occasionally, but people are getting better. So now they are producing fakes that are for humans completely undistinguishable. And we actually need to use AI and machine learning to catch those elements. And we need to use smarter and smarter algorithms by day, because the opponents against us are improving on a daily basis.
So what kinds of things do the artificial intelligence look for? I mean, are there specific tells here that the humans miss?
Well, I'm wondering whether you want to commit some fraud today or whether you are just asking out of
It's a fair question. It's a fair question.
It's a very fair question. So the way how we operate is that we don't look for any specific thing, because then if I misspoke in this interview, you would know what to do. And we don't definitely want you to become a criminal. You are too smart for that. So what we do is that we look at conjunction of hundreds of parameters. So in the ideal case, we look at everything from what is the ID card, how is it positioned on the table, what are the different angles, what is the table behind it, how is it photographed, to doing analysis of what is actually written on the card, through basically understanding the data, understanding the state, the issuing organization, and all those things. And then we build a holistic view. But we also look at the behavior of people or onboarded identities throughout the process. So we see how they interact with the IT environment. We see how they transact after having been onboarded. We know what they do. And by looking at all this range of data, we can make the best decision available.
What is your advice for people who think this might be something that they should be concerned about?
Well, it depends whether you are a fintech or onboarding manager in a bank, or whether you are an individual who's concerned about their own security and privacy. So for an individual, I would say don't let your personal data being stolen, which is a very easy thing to say. But it means be very careful to whom you entrust your data and what kind of information are you sharing and how. Because if someone asks you to email your confidential information or picture of the ID, it can be misused very easily. Some check-in processes in different locations are basically indistinguishable from onboarding in a bank. So what we have seen happening is that people enter the building. The receptionist asks them, "Oh, can you show me your ID?" But the receptionist actually has already opened the application for account opening, takes a picture of the person, takes a picture of the ID, passes the identity verification step, and then opens an account in that person's name. That's very simple. We have seen this same operation in a homeless shelter, where you essentially provide all of the nice services, you give new clothes to homeless people, but then you also steal all of their identity and all the money they might have had. That's not how you should behave, and you should be very careful when someone asks you to prove your identity. For a bank, you need to be thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. If you are a fintech or if you are a bank, if you're lending money, and these companies are specifically being targeted, obviously, you need to think 2 or 3 steps ahead of the attackers. It's not only how did I stop the guy yesterday and I'm not losing too much money last week, but it's how do I make sure that I'm not losing money next month? How do I make sure that in 2 months I'm not going to go bankrupt because of a fraud that happens over the weekend? The danger of shallow fakes is they can be produced at scale. And this can happen very quickly. If you have a completely automated process, you can actually issue 1,000 loans per hour without knowing that. And if you walk into the bank on Monday morning and you learn that you issued 1,000 mortgages for 1 million each with no houses that actually exist, it might be a small trouble for the bank.
Joe, what do you think?
Dave, can you imagine the absolute nightmare situation of going through something with an auditor and finding that one of the verification documents for a Know Your Customer requirement is a driver's license that has a picture of a cat on it?
Yeah. that would probably not be a good day.
Right. I cannot imagine being the employee that has to go through that and just going, oh, well, this is not right.
Right.
Because I'm pretty sure Mittens here doesn't actually have a driver's license.
No, it seems we've made a little mistake here.
Right.
Small error. Yeah.
Shallow fakes, another term. It's probably a good name, though. We have cheap fakes, which are based on the idea that we just take a video and do things to it to make people look like they're drunk. We saw that with Pelosi and Trump during the Trump presidency.
Right. They'll slow things down to make it look like they're slurring their words or, yeah.
Yeah. So the term deepfake comes from the fact that they are created with deep learning, which is an AI technique.
Yeah.
And fake photos can be made with what are called GANs, which are something adversarial networks, general adversarial networks.
That's right, yeah.
Which is another AI technique. But if you apply GANs to something or to make videos, I think we can still call them deepfakes. Yeah, I think everybody understands what they are. So I like the term shallow fake, even though it may not use deep learning. I mean, they might be using AI to generate fake documents or pictures for fake documents, right?
Right.
But what they're doing is they're attacking the AI that's in place already. They're using AI to attack or processes to attack the AI. And they're trying to find weaknesses and vulnerabilities in these existing systems.
Which AI? What do you mean?
The AI on the systems, on the verification systems.
Oh, I
right?
see.
So, and when I say they, I mean the bad guys. What the bad guys are doing is trying to defeat these AI systems. The systems that look at it as a classifier. Is this a real driver's license?
Yeah.
Nope, that has a picture of a cat. That's not a real driver's license.
Right. It's a very handsome cat, but a cat nonetheless.
Right, that's right. And as we know, cats are notoriously bad drivers.
That's right. Yes, that is true.
Always swerve for the dog.
It's been proven.
Yep. So now bad guys are generating these fraudulent documents, and they're mostly using automation and maybe a little bit of AI for these cards. And now they're doing this at scale. So, I mean, when you think about making the process of opening an account more difficult, as a bad guy, you sit there and go, okay, well, this is how they've done it. So I'm going to automate this, and I'm also going to have a bunch of scripts that just generate some synthetic identities, and I'm going to try to overwhelm this system, and one of them will work, and one of them will stick.
Right.
Or maybe they're not synthetic identities. Maybe I have a database of actual stolen information from people so that the information is more, or the attempts are more likely to stick and to work. And then I'll have some accounts through which I can launder some money.
You know, every time I go to some place, and I would say mostly what I'm thinking of are medical establishments.
Yeah.
Where they say, "Can I have your driver's license and your insurance card?" And I hand them over, and what's the first thing they do?
Scan them.
They put them in a scanner.
Right.
It makes me go, ugh, a little bit. But, you know, I guess.
That happened to me very recently.
Yeah.
I can't remember where it was.
Yeah.
You know, for the individual, think about who you give your identity to, just like you were just talking about.
Right.
You know, I have not given my Social Security number to a medical provider in probably 20 years.
Okay.
They've asked for it, and I've refused. And I said, you know, if that's a deal breaker, we can not do business, and I can make a phone call because you're not supposed to ask me for that if I refuse to give it to you. And the reason I've never given it away is because I've always been afraid that they're going to get targeted in some data breach.
Yeah.
And then somebody's going to have all the information they need to do whatever they want with you. You know, from a identity theft standpoint.
Yeah.
FinTech needs to think. Financial institutions need to think 3 moves ahead. I think that's a very good suggestion here from Martin. That you really need to be doing your threat modeling and understanding, thinking like a bad guy. You know, you're not a bad guy because you think about how to exploit a system. You're a bad guy when you start exploiting the system and committing fraud.
Yeah.
So just thinking about how the system could be exploited doesn't make you bad.
Sure.
Threat model.
Yeah. All right. Well, interesting stuff for sure. And again, our thanks to Martin Rehack for joining us. He is the CEO and founder at Resistant AI. We do appreciate him taking the time for us. And we want to thank our sponsors, KnowBe4. They are the social engineering experts and the pioneers of new school security awareness training. Be sure to take advantage of their free phishing test, which you can find at knowbe4.com/fishtest. Think of KnowBe4 for your security training. That is our show. We want to thank all of you for listening. We want to thank the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at isi.jhu.edu. The Hacking Humans podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our senior producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpe. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Thanks for listening.